What's going on? Welcome back for another FAQ. We're talking about lug nuts today. Let's get into it. So one question that we get commonly is it appropriate to tighten my wheel in a certain fashion? What people are referring to is the fact that there is a certain sequence that you need to tighten your lugs in. That has to do with how many lugs it has, but if it's a 5-lug pattern, you commonly hear people talk about the star pattern. That's essentially where you're working from the top, going straight across, going across the other way. You see what's happening here? What we're trying to do is we're trying to evenly distribute the torque to make sure that the wheel is evenly kind of applied to the vehicle. And that's what we're doing. So yes, look up your bolt pattern, make sure that you know what the proper torque sequence is. Do it correctly.
You win.
So we hear this quite a bit, and we usually find this in the comments of our video, and that has to do with the fact that when you tighten your wheels, we say to use a torque wrench. In fact, most people that are informed say to use a torque wrench. But why is it that you still see a lot of people using impact guns to tighten their wheels? Is there a right and wrong? And the answer to this is you should always use a torque wrench when you're applying the torque to the lug nuts on your vehicle. That's going to give you an accurate measure and make sure that you don't over torque the lug nut. It's also going to make sure that you apply the ample amount of torque to that lug nut. That's the clamping force that holds your wheel in the car. This is an area you do not want to mess around with. So what's the problem with using an impact gun? Well, if you use an impact gun, generally those things are rated for like an obscene amount of torque. Even if you have a really crappy one, if you're using a pretty good air gun, it's gonna give you a lot of torque. And yes, there's those little notches on the back of the gun that allow you to adjust, but that's not an accurate measurement. It doesn't really work to a standard that would classify as a calibration, right? So we can't use that as a way of introducing some torque, but not enough. Anyhow, the point here is using an impact gun could easily cause an issue where you, over time, especially over time, will start to stretch your wheel stud or your lug bolt. Doing damage to that is going to be the failure point that you could potentially have. And a lot of times that you see people have issues where they break a wheel stud, it's not necessarily from that one incident. A lot of times it happens from that stud has just been taken to the most extreme over and over and over again. Using an impact gun over and over and over again has stretched that stud, it's weakened it, it's fatigued it, and those are the things that allow your wheel to stay on the car. So using a torque wrench is a way of doing it correctly, making sure it applies to the vehicle manufacturer's specifications, because that's what you're looking for, and it makes sure that you get it right every time.
Hey guys, Rich from Koenig. All right, so our next question is, I just got a new set of wheels. How do I install the lug nuts without scratching the finish? When installing your new wheels, using a regular lug wrench and socket may be harmful to the finish of your paint. Guys like Scott and Aki have shown us in previous videos that they actually have a set of sockets that's lined with nylon that is used to protect the paint and finish on your wheels. You could pick up a set of these on Amazon. It's a really good investment. It's a really cheap, easy way to protect your wheels.
So this is a question we get every day, and this has to do with which lug nuts should I get for my wheels. Now, when it comes down to aftermarket wheels, you need to know a few things. Most aftermarket wheels are going to require a conical seat lug nut. Now, we've shown you this before, we've done other videos. This has to do with a lug nut seat that is essentially at a 45 or 60 degree taper. And what you're looking for here is that it mates up with the aftermarket wheel that you have and the seat of that PC area. If you don't do that, if you go with like a ball seat, or a lot of times your factory hardware will be ball seat, if you put ball seat hardware on a conical seat wheel, you will eventually have the wheel rattle and wobble off the car. That is not a question, that is a fact. So make sure you're using the appropriate hardware. We tend to recommend a spline drive tuner diameter hardware for installing your wheels, and that really has more to do with ensuring that you have all the room inside the lug hole area to make sure you don't remove any paint, you don't scratch anything. It usually comes with a key. It does offer a minute amount of protection, although I will tell you that anybody that is well versed in stealing your wheels, that really won't be a complication for them to get past. But it also is just a much easier lug nut to work with as far as room is concerned and not scratching the lug area. So this is a tricky one. This next question has to do with how much lug nut is actually able to thread on to to a wheel stud. This is thread engagement. This is a term that we have covered in another video, and if you don't know what it is, I recommend highly that you watch it. I'm sure that Max will do a good old link over here somewhere. You see what I did there? Like all over the place. This video is going to be something that you really need to understand, especially if you've gone with a different wheel setup or a new wheel setup, and even more so if you've even thought that you're going to use a spacer on the vehicle at all. Because when you use a spacer, you're actually utilizing the area where thread engagement would occur to essentially push the wheel out. That space is actually necessary. So how do you know what the proper thread engagement for your vehicle is? General rule of thumb is that you want to have the diameter of the stud be the amount that the lug nut can thread on. So if it's a 12 millimeter stud, you need to have 12 millimeters of thread engagement. Now, if you have a 1.5 millimeter lug nut, right? You've seen 12 millimeter by 1.5. What you're essentially going to do is divide that 12 millimeter by 1.5. That roughly gives you the numbers of turns on the lug nut that you need to have the proper thread engagement. Remember, thread engagement is not just how much a lug nut goes on, it's also about the amount of kind of clamping force and stress that's evenly distributed in that lug nut on that stud. All those little scientific numbers and mathematical equations that you got in there are what keep you safe. So don't ignore this fact. This is probably one of the most overlooked and highly problematic things that you will see when it comes down to wheels and tires. Please take this one seriously. Look at the video, educate yourself.
Can you drive with a missing lug nut? The short answer is yes, you can. The real answer is no, you should not.
Don't do that.
I know from experience that you can drive with a missing lug nut. At a certain time, I had a set of crappy aluminum neochrome lug nuts on my car, and I was driving towards a red light, and a guy gets out of his car, comes up to my window, and says, "Hey man, your wheel's wobbling a lot." I checked, and I was missing 2 lug nuts off my car, and the other ones weren't tightened down properly. But I was able to drive my car to my auto shop the next day and get that addressed. If that situation happens to you, you should go right to your wheel and tire professional and have them fix that, or go to your local auto shop and buy a new set. If it's a short-term fix, it's not something where you would need to call a tow truck and get your car towed. It's still operable, but we would not suggest doing that for a long time. You should be driving with all lug nuts secured on your car.
Well, thanks for joining us today. We hope that you have found this informative like the other FAQs that we have done in the past. If you haven't seen any of them, go check them out. They're on our channel. We like having you here. We hope you like being here. We will catch you on the next one.